King Tejada lost everything. His empire is gone. His allies are scattered, and the streets that once feared him now barely notice. But even in hiding, he's not broken, he's plotting, watching, and waiting. This is the story of Kane's life after the fall, and why the man who seems defeated is far from finished. King Tejada was once untouchable, a force in the Tejada family, respected and feared by everyone on the street. He had money, muscle, and influence, but all that vanished in the blink of an eye. One mistake, one betrayal, and suddenly Kane was not a king, he was a fugitive. The world he knew, the streets he ruled, and the people he trusted all turned against him. Monet, the one person he relied on the most, was gone, leaving Kane with nothing but questions and regrets. No territory, no crew, no plan, just him and a life on the run. And it's in this space between fear and survival that Kane's true story begins. The streets he once controlled became a maze of shadows, and every corner held danger. No longer the hunter, Kane became the hunted. Every knock on a door, every passing stranger could mean trouble. This is the life of a man stripped bare, forced to rely on nothing but his wits, instincts, and memory of the life he lost. Being on the run is not just about avoiding bullets or rival gangs, it's about surviving the emptiness inside. Kane is alone, and for the first time, he's forced to think about who he really is without his empire. Without Monet guiding him, without his family behind him, Kane has to face himself. The loneliness is heavy, gnawing at him, but it also sharpens his mind. He learns to move quietly, to read people, and to anticipate danger before it reaches him. Kane starts to see the streets differently, no longer as a playground for power, but as a place full of enemies and opportunities alike. He notices alliances forming and falling, rivalries heating up, and every decision carries weight. Every day is a choice: stay hidden, or take a risk that could bring him closer to rebuilding everything he lost. This reflection changes him. He begins to understand the true cost of loyalty, betrayal, and ambition. Kane's survival instinct, honed over years of violence and street warfare, becomes his only companion. He learns how to disappear into the crowd, how to watch without being seen, and how to strike when least expected. He trades the luxury of power for the simplicity of survival. Learning that life on the run is not glamorous, he must find food, shelter, and allies carefully or else risk being exposed. His skills as a fighter, a strategist, and a streetwise operator are tested more than ever. Every confrontation could end his life, yet each one also teaches him lessons he never learned while sitting in the safety of the Tejada Empire. Kane becomes faster, quieter, and smarter. The man who once relied on fear and reputation now relies on knowledge, timing, and cunning. While the world believes he's broken, he's quietly rebuilding the one thing no one can take from him: his ability to survive at all costs. Even in hiding, Kane's mind is never idle. He's constantly thinking about the future, analyzing what went wrong, and imagining the moves that could put him back on top. Kane knows he can't stay gone forever. The streets, the game, and his identity demand his return. Every decision he makes on the run is calculated, planting seeds for a comeback that will surprise everyone. He observes former allies, old enemies, and the new players rising in his absence. Every step he takes, every safe house he chooses, and every silence he keeps is part of a bigger plan. Kane Tejada is no longer just running, he's surviving with purpose. And while the world believes he's down for good, he's quietly preparing for a return that will shake the Tejada Empire and the streets he once ruled. The fall has humbled him, but it has not defeated him. The streets may have claimed his empire, but they will never claim his spirit. Kane's world has shrunk to the size of his own survival. No safe houses, no loyal crew, no empire to command, just the open streets and the constant awareness that danger is never far behind. Every step he takes, every alley he passes, is measured. He moves quietly, observing, listening, calculating. He's no longer the man who could walk into a room and demand respect. Now he earns it through caution, stealth, and the subtle intimidation of someone who has nothing left to lose. The luxury of power is gone, replaced by a life of scarcity. And vigilance, even simple things, sleeping without being found, getting a meal, avoiding law enforcement or rival gangs, require more planning than Cain ever imagined. Each day is a negotiation with survival itself, a test of how long he can remain unseen yet alive. And every night is filled with the weight of being hunted rather than being the hunter. Isolation has become Cain's constant companion, and it is teaching him lessons he never learned in the Empire. Loneliness cuts deeper than any bullet, but it also sharpens his instincts. Without allies, every decision must be made alone, and every mistake could be fatal. Cain starts to notice patterns in the city that were invisible before the rhythms of surveillance, the ways people move when they think no one is watching, the hidden dangers in seemingly safe neighborhoods. He begins to anticipate threats not just with speed, but with strategy. Every encounter, every whisper of danger, becomes a learning experience. Paranoia is no longer a weakness for Cain. It is a tool. It keeps him alive. It forces him to think. Like an outsider looking in, a man observing the game he once played from the inside. Slowly, this isolation transforms him from a reckless enforcer into a calculated survivor. A man whose patience and foresight grow sharper with every day he spends in hiding. Despite the constant threat and solitude, Cain cannot completely shed his identity. He was never meant to be just another face in the crowd. His reputation follows him like a shadow, whispered in the streets and remembered by those who once feared him. Some corners of the city still recognize his presence even when he stays in the shadows, and that recognition brings both danger and leverage. Cain uses this to his advantage, manipulating perception without revealing himself fully. He learns to trade small displays of influence for safety, knowing when to fight, when to run, and when silence speaks louder than violence. Life on the run strips away pride, but it also reveals a new kind of power, the power of invisibility, patience, and unpredictability. Cain begins to understand that strength is not just about muscles or territory, it is about control over perception, timing, and choice. Yet even in this constrained existence, Cain's mind is never idle. Every moment alone is spent evaluating the past, imagining the future, and considering how the pieces of the streets are moving in his absence. He watches former allies, rivals, and newcomers, storing information, identifying weaknesses, and planning for the inevitable moment when he will no longer need to hide. Each step in the shadows becomes part of a larger strategy for reclaiming not just his place, but his identity. The streets have changed, and so has Cain, but the hunger for power, respect, and revenge burns quietly beneath the surface. Life on the run has taught him patience, humility, and precision, and these lessons make him far more dangerous than before. He is not merely surviving, he is adapting, evolving, and silently preparing for a return that will remind the city that Tejada was never someone to be forgotten. No matter how far Cain runs, the streets have a way of pulling him back. It isn't just the adrenaline or the danger that calls him, it's who he is at his core. Tejada was never meant to live in the shadows, never meant to watch life from the sidelines. Survival alone cannot satisfy him. Every day spent hiding reminds him of what he's lost: influence, respect, and the fear he once commanded effortlessly. He can walk down a block, blend into the crowd, and yet the streets whisper his name. That whisper stirs something inside him, a combination of pride, anger, and unfinished business. Cain is not running because he wants to, he's running because he must, but the reality is, he can't stay gone forever. His identity, forged in violence and power, refuses to fade quietly. The man who once ruled the Tejada Empire is still alive, still calculating, and still waiting for the right moment to reclaim his place. Time alone has given Cain perspective, but it has also intensified his cravings. The thrill of control, the fear he inspired, and the respect he commanded cannot be replicated in hiding. being anonymous, surviving day by day, is a hollow existence. Kane's mind constantly drifts back to old alliances, old grudges, and the moments where loyalty turned to betrayal. Each memory is a reminder that he belongs in the game, not on the sidelines. And while some might think he would grow cautious or passive over time, the opposite is true. The absence of power makes him sharper. It makes him more dangerous. Every day he watches the streets evolve without him. He notes opportunities, weaknesses, and openings. The longer he stays away, the more he understands that the game doesn't pause for anyone, and neither can he. Kane also cannot escape the weight of unfinished business. The enemies who took pieces of his empire, the allies who doubted him, and the family he once protected all remain unresolved equations in his life. Kane's sense of honor, loyalty, and revenge is deeply tied to his identity. He doesn't just want to survive, he wants to settle scores, prove himself, and make everyone remember exactly who he is. The world thinks he's a man in hiding, a fugitive fading into obscurity, but Kane sees it differently. To him, every day is a countdown until he can act again. Every street corner. Kane also cannot escape the weight of unfinished business. The enemies who took pieces of his empire, the allies who doubted him, and the family he once protected all remain unresolved equations in his life. Kane's sense of honor, loyalty, and revenge is deeply tied to his identity. He doesn't just want to survive, he wants to settle scores, prove himself, and make everyone remember exactly who he is. The world thinks he's a man in hiding, a fugitive fading into obscurity, but Kane sees it differently. To him, every day is a countdown until he can act again. Every street corner, every passing figure, every whispered rumor is a part of the map he's memorizing in his mind. The pieces are aligning in his favor, and he knows that the longer he waits, the better prepared he will be to strike back with precision and authority. Even the solitude he's endured has made him smarter. Kane's impulsive tendencies, which once led to reckless decisions, have been tempered by months of reflection and observation. He has learned patience, how to analyze movements, anticipate threats, and exploit weakness without drawing attention. Yet, while he has become more calculating, the hunger inside him has not diminished. He can survive without power, but he cannot exist without influence, power, control. And respect are in his blood, and the streets are his only stage, no matter how deeply he hides. The world he left behind still defines him. Kane's return is inevitable, not just because the streets need him, but because he cannot ignore himself. The man who was feared, admired, and unstoppable cannot remain absent. He is not just returning to reclaim territory. He is returning to reclaim himself, his name, and the legacy that no exile, betrayal, or downfall can erase. Even while Kane moves in the shadows, even while he survives day to day, the weight of unfinished business presses on him relentlessly. The streets don't forgive, and neither does Kane's conscience. His empire may have fallen, but the debts, betrayals, and alliances he left unresolved still demand attention. There are enemies who believe he's gone for good, rivals who think the Tejada name has lost its bite, and even allies who question loyalty. Every one of these unresolved threads is a silent call back into the game. Kane understands that survival alone is not enough to truly exist. To feel whole again, he must confront the ghosts of the past and settle the scores that never died. His absence has given others a false sense of security. But for Kane, the stakes are personal, not just territorial. He isn't just running to survive, he's running to plan the reckoning that will make everyone remember why they feared him in the first place. Monet's absence leaves one of the deepest scars. She was more than an ally, more than family. She represented the power structure Kane both protected and depended on. Without her, his position is vulnerable, but it's also incomplete. Her memory and the tension of their fractured bond haunt Kane constantly. Every decision he makes is measured against what could have been, what was lost, and what needs to be reclaimed. Their relationship may be broken, but it is far from irrelevant. It drives him, sharpens his focus, and reminds him of both his failures and his potential. Cain knows that unfinished personal ties are just as dangerous as the enemies waiting in the streets, and he is determined to resolve them not with apologies, but with the kind of action that leaves no room for doubt beyond Monet. The enemies he once clashed would continue to shape his choices. Rival families, opportunistic gang members, and even new players who rose in his absence are unknowingly stepping into a chessboard Cain has been silently mapping for months. Every move they make is observed, recorded, and analyzed. Cain has learned to wait for the perfect moment, to strike with precision, and to use the element of surprise as his most lethal weapon. He doesn't act on emotion, he acts on strategy. Each day spent in hiding is a rehearsal for his eventual return, allowing him to calculate who can be used, who can be destroyed, and who must be watched. Unfinished business is not just a weight, it is a weapon, and Cain wields it with cold, patient intent. Even the streets themselves seem to pull him back, like an invisible tether. Territory, influence, and respect are not just possessions. They are part of Cain's identity. The city remembers him, the players remember him, and the world he abandoned still recognizes his absence. Cain understands that every unresolved conflict, every betrayed loyalty, every challenge left unanswered is an open door. Walking away was never an option, because the story he began cannot end in exile. The unfinished business he carries is both his burden and his blueprint, a map that guides him through danger, deception, and opportunity. Survival is not the goal, reclaiming power, settling scores, and redefining the streets on his own terms is. And while the world may think Cain Tejada is gone, every shadow he passes, every whisper he leaves behind, signals that his return is inevitable. His empire may have fallen, but the unfinished business of his life is what ensures that he will rise again, smarter, sharper, and more dangerous than anyone expects. Time on the run has changed Cain Tejada in ways the streets would never expect. The reckless enforcer who once acted on impulse, driven by anger and loyalty, has transformed into a man who calculates, observes, and waits. Survival alone is no longer his goal. Understanding, patience, and precision now guide every decision. Every alley he passes, every interaction he has, is a test of timing and control. Gone is the brute who relied solely on fear. In his place is a predator who uses intelligence as his weapon. Cain has learned that the streets do not reward emotion, they reward strategy. Violence without purpose, loyalty without foresight, and power without planning all lead to downfall. And Cain has seen enough downfall to know that brute force alone will never restore him to his place. This evolution is subtle, almost invisible to those who remember him only as muscle. But it is the quiet, calculated transformation that makes him far more dangerous than before. Isolation has been Cain's teacher. Being constantly on alert, moving from place to place, and relying on his own instincts has honed skills he never truly valued when he was part of the Tejada Empire. He has become patient, able to wait for the perfect moment rather than striking immediately. He has become observant, noticing details others would overlook, a change in a rival's routine, a whisper of dissent among former allies, a pattern that hints at opportunity. He has learned to manipulate perception, allowing others to underestimate him while he studies their moves. Every encounter, every escape, every decision to remain in the shadows is a lesson in strategy and control. The man who was once impulsive has become measured, and the streets will feel the difference when he chooses to emerge. Cain's evolution is also emotional. Hardship has stripped away what was unnecessary bravado, pride, and short-term anger, leaving behind only focus and determination. Where he once sought respect through intimidation, he now seeks it through action and precision. Where he once reacted violently to betrayal, he now waits, watches, and strikes with consequences that are not only swift but unforgettable. Every move he makes is deliberate, designed to send a message not just to those who wronged him, but to everyone who underestimates him. He has become colder because he has learned that emotion can be exploited. He has become smarter because he has learned that information is power. And he has become deadlier because he has learned that patience is more lethal than blind rage. This evolution makes Cain a new kind of threat one the streets and even the Tejada Empire cannot ignore. Perhaps most dangerous of all, this evolution has not diminished his hunger. It has refined it. Cain still wants what he lost: power, respect, and influence, but now he understands that it cannot be taken recklessly. He is preparing for a return that will be strategic, precise, and unstoppable. The mistakes of the past will not be repeated. Allies and enemies alike will see a man who is calm, controlled, and deadly. His survival has taught him more than any empire could. He understands timing, leverage, and the true cost of loyalty and betrayal. Cain Tejada has not just adapted, he has evolved into someone who is smarter, colder, and far more lethal than the man who once ruled through fear alone. And when he decides to step out of the shadows, the streets will remember exactly why Cain Tejada was, is, and always will be a force that cannot be ignored. Cain Tejada's story is more than survival, it's a bridge between the old and the new, and that makes him a perfect fit for Power Legacy. The series thrives on legacy characters who carry the weight of past decisions, family ties, and street reputations into new conflicts. Cain is one of the few characters whose history is inseparable from the narrative of the Tejada Empire, yet his evolution on the run allows him to enter the new era with a fresh edge. He represents continuity and change at the same time. The world remembers the fear he commanded, but they will now confront a man who is smarter, more patient, and more lethal than ever. Cain is not just returning to stir the streets, he is returning to challenge the power structures that have emerged in his absence. His presence ensures that Power Legacy remains connected to the past while introducing a wild card who can reshape the game entirely. What makes Cain especially compelling is the balance between personal motivation and narrative impact. He isn't returning out of nostalgia or sentimentality. He is returning because the streets demand it, and because his own identity cannot survive